I think especially if you're newly diagnosed, you are told, count your carbs, take the insulin. If you go high, give a correction. If you go low, consume glucose. And it's like, oh, easy. And then when you realize there's so many other factors, it's like, oh my gosh, so this is what everybody means.
Well, my favorite is, at least you mentioned, people are getting told to correct, because I've come across people where they're just told, here's an insulin pen, take 5 units per meal, go. And I'm thinking, and they'll talk to me a year later. I'm like, how did you just make it through the past year?
Welcome to the Your Diabetes Insider podcast, where we take all of the mysteries of blood sugar control, focusing on nutrition, exercise, and any of the other 40 plus factors that may impact your blood sugar. If you don't know me, my name is Ben Zeal. I'm a registered dietitian, certified diabetes educator, strength and conditioning coach, and I've lived myself with type 1 diabetes for over 20 years. And I am here to share everything that I have learned in both my personal and professional experience, so you can live that incredible diabetes life. So get ready and let's dive right into today's episode.
What is going on? Welcome to this episode of the Your Diabetes Insider podcast, where we've got an amazing guest who is going to blow your mind in the exercise world and in so many other topics related to diabetes. And she always has the most positive outlook out of anybody I've ever met on the diabetes side of things. So let's jump in. Let's welcome Sami Parker. What's up?
Hey, well, first, that was really sweet. Sometimes I do not feel like I have a positive outlook. I try, because I'm like, you just gotta roll with the punches. But then there's days where I'm like, F asterisk these, and I'm like, this sucks. But when I say diabetes sucks, I'm like laughing, and someone's like, how are you laughing right now? I'm like, because what else are you gonna do?
There are so many days where I feel like nope, I'm done with this. I'm gonna go punt it off the balcony. And then it's like, I can't actually do that because it's not gonna go anywhere. But it would feel really good.
Yeah, exactly. I got a diabetes tattoo, and it's a T1D for a medical medical bracelet, since I think my diabetes alert bracelet always broke. And so when I was getting it, my sister's like, what about the days you just are so over it though? I just don't know. And I said, but that's the thing. It never disappears. So it's like, I could be over it, but I still have to deal with it. So it's like, if I have this on me, there might be days I hate it, just days I love it. But I guess it's the best way to explain diabetes. It's a love-hate relationship.
Well, because it does so many good things, yet it also has so many just awful, terrible experiences at the same time.
Exactly. I just posted a meme. Well, not a meme, I guess. I like to make those little diabetic realities. And I said diabetes is the future. I think I can predict it, but if I'm being honest, I have no idea what's going to come. And that's diabetes. I'll do one thing one day and one thing the next. And every time, it's pretty much slightly always different, no matter what.
I said a quote similar at one point where it was you can do the same thing at the same time, same everything, and you can get two totally different results, and it's not your fault. It just kind of
Exactly.
is.
Yeah. And there's so many factors that go into it. It's just, I think especially if you're newly diagnosed, you are told, count your carbs, take the insulin. If you go high, give a correction. If you go low, consume glucose. And it's like, oh, easy. And then when you realize there's so many other factors, it's like, oh my gosh, so this is what everybody means.
Well, my favorite is, at least you mentioned, people are getting told to correct, because I've come across people where they're just told, here's an insulin pen, take 5 units per meal, go. And I'm thinking, they'll talk to me a year later. I'm like, how did you just make it through the past year?
It's funny you say that, because I was just in Alabama visiting family, and this is actually a crazy story. I don't even think I've told anyone this story, but
let's hear it.
I was at a coffee shop, and I was getting coffee, and there was these insane pastries, and I was looking at the girl, and I was talking to her. She was really cute. I'm talking to her, and she said she's 17, and I'm like, oh, so we start chatting. I'm like, no way, you're 17. You're 25, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, yeah. And I was like, these pastries are absurd. And she's like, I know, seriously, I swear this one would make my blood sugar go to 600. And I was thinking, did I tell her I'm diabetic? What? And I'm like, oh, I kind of looked at her I was confused. And she's like, no, literally. And I was like, wait, do you have diabetes? And she's like, oh, yeah. And I was like, did I tell you I have diabetes? Is that why you made that joke? She's like, no, I just made the joke. And I was like, oh yeah, I have type 1. And she's like, oh, me too. So we start getting into her whole life story. And she was literally like, yeah, I don't know. I don't really give insulin for food. And I was like, wait, what? And she's like, no, I just take I don't know, I take the one like Lantus, and then she's like, and then I'm on, I don't know, there's a Humalog pen. I don't know what it's for.
Oh my God.
And I was like, wait, when did you get diagnosed? And she's like 6 months to a year ago. And I'm like, wait, so how do you eat? So she's like laughing, like, well, I just like don't eat till night, and I eat like nothing. And she had like a lot of other medical stuff, like beyond what I could tell in one episode. So part of me was like, whoa. But she's like saying this, and she's like, yeah, but whenever I like the cinnamon roll, I just feel like shit. And I was like, okay, so tomorrow, so the Humalog pen, that's for like correcting when your blood sugar's higher for food. And she's like, oh, like true story. I'm sitting there thinking, am I in a movie right now? Is this a joke? So I go, try to give like 5 units to the cinnamon roll. Cause like the cinnamon roll was giant, and I'm thinking, you know, like anything is better than nothing. And the next day I come in and she's like, I forgot. But yeah, I felt so shitty. I was like sleeping all night. And I mean,
oh no.
My parents were like dying. They were like, wait, what? And I was like, yeah.
If that doesn't just epitomize that the education is needed out of the gate, and it needs to be more than just, here's a pen, go take your insulin. It needs to be like, this is your pen. This is what you're doing. Let's have you see an educator. Like there's a whole process that just sounds like it just disappeared. It never happened. And then now she's eating cinnamon rolls, which is okay if you know what you're doing dosing wise.
If you know what you're doing. Like
right.
If I was eating a cinnamon roll, I'd be like 3 units pre-bolus, 2 units post-hour, 1 unit post-2 hours. Like I would know.
Oh, I love when we go to Minnesota, there's this place that has these incredible, massive, like big as your face cinnamon rolls. And they're so good. And I've done all the let's assess it. Let's look at the carbs. It's probably 120 grams. And I'm okay with that because I'll know, okay, I'm going to dose it. Here's how I'm going to do it. Is there activity? Factor in all different pieces. But to just think of eating that without any possible idea of what's behind is terrifying.
I just couldn't believe it.
Terrifying. No, and I'm not saying to anybody listening to this, that we're doing medical advice or you're saying, oh, dose for this or whatever, but like talk with your team if you want to do that. But if you're not taking, like, if you don't have a ratio, if you don't have an insulin to carb ratio, or you don't know what that is, please talk to your care team because you've got to have something. Because that situation you just described is terrifying.
Oh, it's for sure terrifying. Yes.
Especially a year in. Like you tell me 2 weeks in, like, fine, I kind of get it.
Yeah, like, okay.
Right. But that's speaking of that though, because obviously, you've had the beatus for a minute. Kind of walk through like kind of your journey. Where did you start with this? How did your life look? Was it completely, upside down after the diagnosis?
Okay, so I'm gonna do a good old, let's see. Okay, I'm gonna try to make my whole summary like less than 5 minutes. Okay, ready, set, time. Okay. So got diagnosed. I was 12 years old. My family already ate pretty healthy. Granted, there were a couple things that I ate still at 12 years old, like mac and cheese. My family owns a restaurant, so it would be like a mac and cheese, or like it could be a random thing like a roll, or chicken tenders once in a while. But like I didn't eat like that all the time. It was kind of one of those things where, like, again, everybody has a different definition of healthy, but I think the biggest one for people to realize is like everything pretty much in moderation dash. I like how a lot of people say like the 80-20 rule, like 80% you eat healthy and 20% you allow yourself whatever. And so I like already had pretty much eaten like that. And I grew up dancing competitively, so I was pretty healthy. When I got diagnosed, I was in a summer ballet camp at my studio. So what we would do is we would start at like 9 a.m., go till noon, and then she'd have their snacks for us, which were like cuties and string cheese and then like crackers, which is classic because it's like the epitome of technically like balanced diet. So I'd have like 2 cuties, 2 string cheeses, and then like probably like 3 crackers. And then I'd continue dancing. So every time my blood sugar was going low, it was going back up from the food. And then that next week I was dancing from like 2 to 9 at night for these like special guest choreographers. Lost a ton of weight, obviously, had all the symptoms. My cousin has it on my dad's side. And then my mom just kind of like knew. So we went in and they diagnosed me. And so that was like, obviously, again, like everybody's diagnosis story. It's shocking. You're overwhelmed. You're like, there's sometimes tears, then you're mad, then you're like, I'm confused. And then you're like, what does this mean? And like, you have to take an insulin shot and you're like, funny. And then they're like, oh, we're not getting, and you're like, no, seriously, what's the punchline? Like, and they're like, no, that's literally what you're going to be doing. And I remember I was like, and so when that happened, like all those little, where my dad would have like ice cream at night or something. And he had kind of just recently had lost a bunch of weight too. So So he was kind of perfect timing, but just in general, like we definitely made healthier options. I say this because people probably would have looked at us if they're hearing this right now and they know my family. They're like, okay, you guys already ate healthy. You guys, like we had like the healthy 100 snack calorie packs.
Oh yeah, I remember those.
Yeah, like my mom was not buying, like we had goldfish once in a while, but that was like a once in a while. It wasn't like my mom just like put them in a bag and said, here, go to lunch with them. Like, so people would probably look at us right now like you're nuts. But those little couple things that were like unhealthier, we fixed and made healthier. Like, or even, I'm not saying that dairy is bad at all, but obviously like for me, like milk in general kept my blood sugars higher, which is why at night, if you go low, people are like, oh, have a glass of milk, you know? So those were just things that like we swapped out for like different alternatives. So that was something that was already like a huge part. But through that, and this is where kind of like, I know we said we were going to talk a little bit about hormones, but it kind of came into play for me in high school because I was one of those lucky, you know, everyone deals with insulin resistance, obviously in the diabetes world. Like it's impossible not to. Well, not impossible. I know a couple people that don't, but a lot of people do. But I was like one of the lucky people that, you know, they say like, oh, 1 out of 10 diabetics have like chronic insulin resistance. Like, and I was just one of those lucky ones because I had hormonal issues. And so I had high testosterone, which as we know, hyperinsulinemia causes an increase in testosterone for women, which hyperinsulinemia just means you're taking high levels of insulin. So yeah, just so people know, sorry, I'm like hyperinsulinemia.
You could throw all the science out. We're all about nerding out.
So that was something, yeah, that I like started when I was like a sophomore being like, I'm really resistant. I work out like 6 hours a day. I eat pretty damn healthy and I'm gaining weight, questionable. And then by my junior year, I was dealing with a lot of stuff. I had like a spot of alopecia on my back of my scalp, which is like autoimmune, insulin resistance. So we went and got my hormone levels tested. My DHEA was super high. Testosterone was super high. She was like, basically you have adrenal PCOS. And that's when I was like, what? She's like, yeah, like that's why you can't lose weight. That's why you consistently gain weight. And I was like, so what do you do for that? And she's like, well, you know, like dancing really causes spikes in your blood sugar because of, you know, it's like so much adrenaline being released when you're dancing and like the excitement and everything. And I was like, oh, so you want me to not dance? And she literally said, she's like, I just think you should consider like, and she's awesome, like awesome. But she was like, with your condition, I would definitely consider, you know, either working out earlier, not dancing past a certain time at night. Like, oh, and I was like, this can't be happening. I mean, because honestly, if I would have stopped, it probably would have helped a lot. But I was like, I am not stopping dancing. So sorry, I'm like going down a rabbit hole.
No, there's so many areas to go from this. So I'm like, this is great.
So from there, it was kind of like a cascade of events. Like this was happening. I had the adrenal PCOS. I got alopecia, which is bald spot in the back of your head, which that was just hilarious when my whole dance team's like, I think you have a bald spot. I'm like, you guys, I do not have a bald spot. And then we all were like dying laughing. And I was like, oh my God, what do I do? And so I had to go get like 100 little shots in my head every 3 weeks. I think it was 3 weeks.
Smokes.
Yeah, to like stimulate hair growth. And I was like, this just is like comedy hour. Like I was like, what else is next? Bring it on. So I dealt with that. And then say from there, it just kind of couldn't lose the weight. We couldn't figure it out. I tried, you know, a birth control because they were like, oh, well, let's try to get your testosterone down. I went on metformin. I did like XYZ. Finally, would get to the point where I was like, you know what? F it. I'm just literally going to eat my Starbucks in the morning, 100 calorie pack of nuts, literally fat-free whipped cream as like my snack. Literally, this is what was happening because I'm going to dance and I need energy, but not energy. And like, I need something that I don't have to take insulin because the only way I was losing weight was literally by cutting my calories and taking way less insulin to have a slight ketosis. So I was basically doing a ketogenic diet without doing the high fat part.
Oh boy.
Which is like, let's say
not great.
No. So I was literally doing that date where it would be like, I'd like, you know, nuts basically would like catch me through the morning at lunch. Then I would have like, I would just have one huge meal at dinner. Which I know, like, obviously, I get everybody does different stuff. So some people prefer they sit all day. They'd rather just have an early dinner at like 5 and that's their thing, right? Like, no shame. But I mean, this was not because it was like a choice. Like, I was like, this is what I had to do in order for me because it was mentally messing me up so much, feeling insecure and not feeling like happy with my body and how much work I was putting into it. So I would eat literally like salmon and then veggies and then a bread roll. And that was like my whole thing. And it was like a huge plate of food, but that's what I did. And so I remember my senior year of high school, that was how like like, basically I dropped a ton of weight, my testosterone lowered, all this stuff. Well, obviously that was not going to be sustainable.
No.
At all. And I've never been one, I will say like this, and I mean this truthfully, I have never once in my life neglected giving myself insulin ever. So like, even at my heaviest, I never was like, I'm not going to give insulin because I want to lose weight.
Diabulimia, not a thing you want to do ever.
No, never. I actually, like what I just told you about my whole story and everything, I think people almost found it crazy that I chose to do that instead of going and becoming diabetic. Like that's literally people I remember would be like, they couldn't fathom that I was doing that and eating the one meal and everything instead of just not giving insulin to lose weight. And I didn't know that diabulimia was a thing. I was literally a senior. Like I already had diabetes for 6 years. And I was like, what's diabulimia? And they're like, where you just don't give your insulin. And I was like, what? And they're like, no, you just neglect giving your insulin because you want to lose weight so that you get ketones. So you shed out.
You run really high on purpose and
purposely run high.
There's so many bad things happen so fast when you do that for a long time.
I mean, literally it's vision loss, you know, you can get
the drop, like everything just shuts down. If you do this for a long period of time, like it's life threatening, legitimately.
It's literally life threatening. And what was crazy to me was that I was sitting over there and because my numbers were so high from my adrenal PCOS and testosterone insulin resistance. I mean, when I say I gave insulin, like it was unreal how much insulin I was giving. And they just assumed that I wasn't giving insulin because my numbers were so high. Because they were like, oh, like I remember she was like, not where like they weren't like saying, oh, you're diabulimic. They just kept asking like, well, you're giving your insulin, right? And like my mom and dad are very involved. So they were like, she literally checks her blood sugar 24/7. Like I wasn't on a CGM at the time. I was finger pricking 15 times a day, giving insulin. Like, and I remembered when they asked me that, it was because they were in shock that I could be that high and still taking that much insulin. But that's when I heard was. And I was like, yeah, like what? And then they told me, and I heard like a lot of people, and I had a couple diabetics that told me they did that. And I was like, what? And she's like, well, I just don't want to give insulin because it causes me to gain weight. But in my head, I was thinking, okay, no shiz, weight gain sucks. But like, what's better, weight gain or literally dying?
Well, and that's the thing too. Doctors have spread for so long that insulin is this primary perpetrator. If you take insulin, the weight gain is going to happen. It's automatically going to happen every single solitary time when it can't be by itself. Like it does not happen by itself. That's the hardest thing. It's always insulin as like the mediator. Insulin's the vehicle, but like you can't build a house out of nothing. You can't be like, here, poof, and a house shows up. Like you have to have inputs to get outputs. You have to have something in to cause that weight gain to happen, and being out of that calorie balance in order to do that. Insulin can facilitate it. But to your point, there's so many people that they get told, oh, insulin's going to cause weight gain. Oh, when you get diagnosed, you're going to gain weight. So therefore, I should stop my insulin. I'm not saying to do this, but this is what people's thought process is. I should stop insulin so then I won't gain any weight. And then people run really high. They sometimes go into, diabetic ketoacidosis. They go to the hospital. They get super sick. And then even more scary, they continue doing it. And then there was a girl I remember, I think I was in high school. So I met her at a diabetes conference, and then I saw her a few years later, and she was 19 or 20, and she was already losing feeling in fingers and toes because she wasn't taking insulin. She's like, oh, well, I feel really great. And I'm like, no, you definitely are full of it. And then she took me aside and she's like, no, I feel absolutely miserable. And I'm like losing the feeling in my fingers and toes, and my sight's starting to go. And I'm like, you're not even legal drinking age yet. Like, what is going on? Like, how can we fix this?
Yeah. And that, I think that what you just said it's so true. It's crazy because like, I think it's wild in terms of like the fact that people, they just, number one, either they don't want to deal with it. So they like freak out and they're like, I'm not taking insulin. But number two, I think what's crazy is like one thing I will say, and this isn't obviously, it's one of those things where like, it's not scientifically proven because technically it's not this isn't the case. This isn't scientifically the case. However, I think everyone will agree with me, even if it's not technically always accurate. But I will say, I definitely think as a diabetic, you have to be tighter on your calories and that's something like, I know it's kind of one of those, this is going to come out. Honestly, this isn't even accurate and this isn't like scientifically proven. I'm just going to be honest with what I think and how it's worked for me. But like, it's one of those things where, okay, I could stick exactly to my calorie maintenance, like exactly every day. And I probably wouldn't gain weight. I wouldn't be now a normal person. I do believe this. The normal person typically can go like 200 calories over over and be fine. Like my sister at times, she could eat, I don't mean this in a bad way, but she can eat more calories than me and won't put on the, and same with other people and other family members and friends. Like we'll both be out somewhere and they'll eat way more than me. And they're like, Baby, you're not eating enough. And I'm like, okay, no offense, you guys. I'm clearly not having an issue with weight. So I need anybody to be like on me. Like I'm fine. I'm not underweight at all. Like if anything, I could like lose a few pounds, but they're like, they don't understand. They're like, but how do you just not, like, it's fine. It's one day. And I'm like, honestly, I do have that mentality a lot of times. Like it's in moderation and it's okay to have that one day where whatever, like popcorn and a movie, XYZ, whatever. But I will say it definitely like if I'm going to do that, it's going to be something that's worth it for me. It's not going to be like just a regular night. I'm going to go have movie popcorn because I feel like it, because yeah, my body isn't going to necessarily bounce back as fast or just this day. Like my insulin resistance isn't going to be gone. It's probably going to make me more resistant the next day. So when I do that, I'm going to choose wiser. So I will say like in that regard, when people say that, I'm like, no, I agree with you. Like you definitely have to be tighter because that excess glucose or excess energy is going to be directly aimed as fat with insulin. Yeah, exactly. And so I will say that. But what we were talking about earlier too is a lot of it has to do with, the high and the low, what exercise you're doing. Yeah. What type of calories? I do firmly believe that. Like, I know you can eat whatever and whatever you want, but yes, I do think that if you're eating X amount of calories in, processed food versus fruit and vegetables, it's going to probably store a little differently.
It definitely will be processed differently in your body.
Mm-hmm. And so I think that's what's so crazy because it's like, it's really sad to me because I get asked that question all the time. Like, how do you lose weight? How do you lose weight? How do you lose weight? And what's crazy is I'm like, honestly, like I've done so many different things. Like after my senior year, when I realized that wasn't reality and I went to college, I think I was eating normal, whatever, healthy weight, still was resistant though. Definitely. I was on 20 units of Levemir. I did the whole food, plant-based, oil-free, low-fat, mastering diabetes method during COVID. Granted, I had the ability to do that during COVID because I'm in a city. So for me, all we did was walk, go to the grocery store and get food and then cook and play games. So I was able to hours cooking and meal prepping and not using oil and learn all of that. Well, no, I first cut down to 15 and then it went down to 9 unit and I dropped a ton of weight just because yes, I think regardless you would drop weight from it, but my metabolism I think was in shock too, just from like, because I'm insulin resistant, the oil was kind of causing that blockage there for me. And it was awesome. It lowered my testosterone, it lowered everything. I was eating more food than I'd ever eaten my entire life. But then once my metabolism was regulated again, and I wasn't living that perfect cookie cutter life, like I realized that wasn't life once COVID was over, right? Like during COVID, it's great. Awesome.
It wasn't sustainable.
But that's not sustainable. And no shame on people that do that because I still eat plant-based.
Right.
But if I'm out and about, I do eat oil. I'm not so worried about making sure my fat's less than my calories. Like it's just, that's not life. And so I think no matter what, it's always still figuring it out. Like I'm still figuring it out. If I could drop 5 pounds by next week, I would gladly, but it's a slow and steady.
It's all slow. Yeah. It's the process. It's the process. And if we're going weight loss, I feel like it's always about dropping it in a way that is sustainable. Cause like you said, you did the complete, mastering diabetes, very plant-based, no oils, no fat, no nothing. And it worked at that time, given that there were a lot more restrictions in place and you didn't have to worry about going to restaurants or being social. But then when life opened back up, you realized, hey, this isn't the thing for me. And I tell people, you can do something for a short period of time, but if you can't sustain it forever, what's the point? Because all it's going to happen is, sure, you could drop 20 pounds or you could drop 15 pounds and your blood sugars can be great. But then the moment you want to go back to living your life, you're going to go revert back to what you were doing, which is going to put you exactly where you were before. And all the weight's going to come back and the blood sugars are going to go back. And then why did you even bother in the first place? So it's got to be viewed as, it's not going to be a short-term thing. Nothing's going to be quick. It's going to be over time. Let's retain as much muscle as we can. Let's do what you need to do. Keep your metabolism humming. Find a way you like eating and let's get you into a deficit that makes sense for you while keeping your numbers happy and not going low every 5 seconds. Because we were talking right before this and that happened. Everybody says, I'm going to drop weight. Their number just tanks immediately. They look at a dumbbell, their number tanks. And it's so obnoxious because then that eats into that deficit. And now the weight's not coming off your body. And now you're extra frustrated.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because it's kind of like what you just said about that. Like that will happen a lot of times, or like I'll give insulin before I work out sometimes, which a lot of people are like, why would you do that? I'm like, well, again, like my testosterone is still high now. And I'm still like, I actually went back on metformin, which is totally a unpopular opinion and a controversial topic for sure.
Explain that a little bit, because I don't know if you know.
So
what is metformin, first of all, if you want to define metformin for people?
So, okay, I'm going to define metformin. Well, in the simplest terms, I'm going to say metformin basically will increase your insulin sensitivity. So it's going to allow your glucose to be uptaken quicker into your cells, which will reduce your blood sugar over time.
It's normally a type 2 drug.
Yeah. It also, the reason I went on the metformin is because I originally went on it for my PCOS, because metformin reduces your testosterone. The reason for that connects to type 2 diabetes, because like I said earlier in the episode, hyperinsulinemia causes an increase in testosterone. So by reducing your insulin, that's going to reduce your testosterone for women with PCOS. So it basically works. It was working as a dual for me. I am on technically 1,000 milligrams a day. Now, how much does it work? And I honestly don't know how always effective necessarily. I will say it's lowering my testosterone. So I'm not on it really to like, yes, that's helpful because I was building muscle. Like I looked like a swole patrol for a hot second and it was not the vibe for me at all.
Swole patrol. I haven't heard that phrase in a
Oh my God. I literally I look like a little muscle mommy, but I was like, I don't know what to do because my job is F45 lifting weights and all this stuff. But insulin's a growth hormone. So if you have high testosterone and you're taking insulin, it's like a key for freaking vibes. So that's what was happening. But I went on the metformin and for me, it's helped with testosterone. Again, blood sugar wise, not really sure. But for me, the bigger issue was the testosterone because I couldn't get it down I didn't want to go into birth control again because it messed up everything. And as much as I've been trying to do it naturally, but it has not changed. So I'm a firm believer. Sometimes I like doing everything naturally and holistic, but I do think there's a time where there's a reason medication is medication. And like with the testosterone, like I could try, but it was like, okay, it might take 5 years, which that's okay. But right now I don't have the mental capacity to wait 5 years to try to get that down. So,
well, and your care team sounds like they were on board with it too, which
they were. Yeah. My endocrinologist was like, your testosterone's very high. And that should not be the case. So she was actually the one, who was like, I get what you're saying, but she's like, there's no long-term effects of taking metformin that I've been shown. Like a lot of it's and I don't get side effects from it. So, but with that and not being on birth control, I have gnarly hormonal effects on my blood sugar, which I forgot about until I went off birth control. And I was like, oh my God, what is this? I was like, this is like somebody literally put water in my insulin instead of insulin. And that makes weight loss hard too, like we were saying, which I'm sure you've seen with women. I don't mean to,
it's a whole, just once the cycle hits and it's that time where the hormones completely change and the progesterone goes boom and the estrogen goes boom and everything just all decides to combine at once. And then everyone's like, I'm a week out from my period and my numbers are terrible. It's like, yeah, that's the time where if you don't make an adjustment, you're probably not going to be a happy camper.
And that's what's funny is it's kind of one of those things where I have some women and they'll comment back on a story or something and say when I increase my insulin, my 24-hour or my long acting or whatever, my Omnipod increases or something, they're like I'm not as whatever, my blood sugars come down if I get more insulin. But even for me, when I give more insulin, it still doesn't do anything. And it's gnarly because that's a total setback for weight loss. That whole 2 weeks, I'm so I just worked my butt off, grinded, walked 10,000, 15,000 steps a day, working out, doing Liguri, Pilates, whatever. And then those 2 weeks, it's insulin. And then it's inflammation. And I'm just
the inflammation. And I feel too, in your particular case, the PCOS adds a whole unique set of challenges that people with diabetes, I feel we're always blessed with something extra, right? There's the buy one, get one, whether it's PCOS or whether it's psoriasis or whether it's Hashimoto's and whatever hand you happen to be dealt. There's a few people I know with a trifecta, but whatever hand you're dealt, it's always how can you navigate that and figure out how to make it still work and still do what you want to do. Clearly it's been a challenge on the weight loss side for you, but you've still been able to bust through and say, hey, I'm still going to be active. I'm still going to eat well. I'm still going to keep my numbers in pretty good control. Yeah.
And that's, I think what's tricky is it's yes, do I wish XYZ? Totally. Exactly. And I finally, like, even though I still struggle with the frustration and my mom's constantly researching stuff and I'm like, just can't lose weight. And I try to eat all XYZ. But it's one of those things where sometimes I have to be like, because I'll talk to guys and this is any like, not trying to say like you guys have it easier at all. But like in terms of I am sometimes like, dang, that does make sense why like a lot of like, but when I was on birth control, I didn't necessarily get it. And then when I went off, I was like, that's so true. Because I've had a couple guys that are like, they've actually said to me, like, you don't get it. Like we don't like, we're not dealing with the random like period highs. Like, so that doesn't mess up our progress like a lot of times. And I realize that's why I think a lot of women find it harder to lose weight because it does mess up. I hate to say it, but it puts a halt in your progress. It might take a step back. And the reality is not all individuals have the stamina and motivation and support around them to like, if they take a step back, instead of like being like, okay, well, I took a step back, but if I keep charging 3 steps on, I might always take 1 step back, but I'm at least moving 2.
Exactly.
And a lot of people who don't have that mentality because of their environment, their situation, and it sucks because I want to be like, even if you're going back a step and you're going 3 steps, but only 2 show, like it's better than nothing. Like
it's still forward. That's all that matters is
exactly.
You could even think of it almost if this makes people's brains, more relaxed. Hey, you took 2 steps forward. For a week, you didn't take any steps. You just stood right where you were. Nothing happened. No forward, no back. You're still 2 steps forward. So
exactly.
It's the journey. And I feel like people, to your point, people forget that. And ironically, this is years ago, Amelia and I joke with this because I had actually written a book with, I'm sure you know Chris Rudin.
Yeah.
So I wrote a book with him about, female hormones and weight loss and keeping blood sugars in range. And Amelia and I joke because I started this project with Chris before she and I even knew each other. And we still haven't formally released it to the world yet, but I have it. There's a copy of it somewhere over there and it's real. And it goes through all the stuff you're describing, right? But the big thing is those first 2 weeks are like the weeks. And then after that, it's like, you got to change up the training, the composition of the meals, like the carbs coming down a little bit and the fat going up a little bit. And then making sure you still can bust through the insulin resistance and maybe not doing as heavy of training during those last 2 weeks, but things have to change. And a lot of women aren't optimizing that because it's already so much of a burden mentally to optimize your blood sugars and make sure you're dosing and dose on time and then live your rest of your life, let alone got to optimize your training, got to optimize this, There's
times where like even I've been supposed to start my period any day. Like the last 3 days I've been like, it's coming today. And I'm like, it's here yet. And it's just like, there's like a wave of like a resistant thing. And I'm like, what the hell? We're down for 2 hours. What? And then it'll be like, and I'm like, it's to come. And then literally nothing. And I'm like, and then it comes down, it drops low. And I'm like, okay, but with that, during like this time, like for me, this time, I solely pretty much focus on just walking because I'm like that when I'm resistant, yeah, even though blood sugar, like lifting weights is going to help you obviously become more insulin sensitive. But in the meantime, right now, it's not. It's just going to make me skyrocket higher, even with the insulin on board, because I have like that net that's like, no one's getting through and now I'm spiking and I'm going to stay there. But it is true. And I think part of me is like, I want to create like a program somehow for like that has all the details of what to do with your period and diabetes and everything. But the truth is it's different for everybody. And it's like, it's not a one-stop shop, unfortunately, even though we all would. And I mean, for you, you've probably seen so many different.
It's like that 80-20 you said before, like 80% of it is the same, right? You versus somebody else, but that last 20%, which is where, 80% of the big things happen. That is the part where if you don't have the nuances down per person, it's just not going to go well. Like it's to be that personalized side. Cause you can say, oh, everybody does this and you'll get to a point, but then it's just going to be hard to break past that, whether it's weight loss, whether it's blood sugars, whatever it might be. But I will say, just as a hypothesis, and I don't think this has ever been shown in science, but it's just something I've always thought about. Yeah. I do feel like dudes don't obviously have, a period the way that y'all do, but I do feel like there is some sort of monthly hormonal surge.
No, you do. I actually looked this up because I was getting a little frustrated. I get frustrated when I don't like when people bash either like, oh, women have it harder, guys have it harder, women have it easier, guys have it easier. I'm like, no, we all deal with it. Everybody deals with it. Like guys still have hormones, and I think it just gets neglected because there's no actual like showing of it. But there is. I was looking it up because I have a little friend and he's so sweet and awesome. But his mom was saying he was dealing with more resistant stuff, so I kind of just looking it up myself. And you guys do have have like, it's technically still considered a growth hormone that you guys have like a hormonal release throughout the month. So it still counts in a different way, obviously, but it's still, I firmly like believe that for sure. Especially when you guys lift. I'm sure there's some kind of, compared to a woman weightlifting, there has to be a surge of either testosterone or like hormone that's causing a spike for you guys too.
Well, and even for that, if we're talking like lifting wise, I mean, a lot of that just comes down to the, as you know, as well as anybody, the volume. So how many sets you're doing, how many reps you're doing, but also how heavy you're going. Because if you tell me, hey, go out there, and I don't like deadlifting, but go deadlift 4 sets of 2 and go super heavy versus, hey, go do a leg extension for 4 sets of 50. My body's going to respond so differently to either of those things. And I had times back when I was younger where I would have my number go from 90 to 300 plus just because of how much of a surge there was in your liver's going to dump energy and you need it now, damn it. So here you go.
That's why I'm always I am always like, lift more repetitions, just because I think it's a lot of times easier for people to manage than doing like heavy. I think for a lot of people, if they're more resistant, lifting heavy and doing fewer reps, I'm like, you're going to need to onboard more insulin before.
I'd say that's all person dependent with their goal too. Cause most people, for 90% of the population, there's no need to just destroy yourself. Like if you're, hey, I want to power lift. I want to be a strong man. I want to do something where I'm pushing to that extreme. Absolutely. And that'll be something you figure out what your blood sugars are going to do. You work with your team. Hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z. We'll make sure this happens. But for most people, they don't have a reason to really go outside of that, scientifically shown 6 to 12 rep range. There's no reason. There's literally no reason.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's it. I think it's very interesting. What's your take on, this is just curious, but on alcohol diabetes?
Oh, wow. I was able to shift gears. With alcohol though, I feel like,
sorry, that's a really random one, but with weight loss.
I was going to say, well, alcohol, I feel like it just in general with diabetes that could be a whole episode in its own right, which we should definitely do. Anyways, with respect to the alcohol, when it comes to weight loss, diabetes or not, there's people that will say, we're going to get really nerdy for a second, the whole glycolysis process, that it goes Krebs cycle. There are people that basically say where once you have alcohol, it stuffs up the Krebs cycle and stops it and says, hey, you are in an energy surplus, meaning, you've taken in more than you've, expended, even if you're not actually in a surplus. So when I was in my good old, macronutrient metabolism class, okay, we did the alcohol side and it would show your body thinks that you have eaten more than you normally would, even if you haven't. And so then it'll say, hey, body, start the laying down body fat process with alcohol. And I mean, obviously you would have to have more, you have to have more than, 1 or 2, like you probably need 3 or 4 or 5. And if you're mixing it with stuff, who knows what's going to happen, but it's definitely not going to expedite the process. Is it going to ruin any weight loss for you? Probably not, unless you start going excessive amounts. And then that's a whole different thing with calories. But blood sugar wise, that can lead to a whole host of other things, which then make things difficult to manage. Then you could go low, then you have to treat that. Then you could end up kicked out of your deficit. And that's where things start to get a little wonky. So that would be my take. I mean, I usually tell people, if you're trying to drop weight, you want to drink a little bit, by all means, just limit it, please. Like 1, maybe 2, cap it there a couple times a week. Like we're not trying to get Team Liddy over here. Like, is this probably awesome? Try not to do that. Even just diabetes wise in general, because the fun preview for that episode about alcohol will be your glucagon won't work. It won't.
Yes.
And that's very scary. So like if you can't orally ingest glucose, it will not go well for you. So please just be safe with it.
Yeah.
That would be the big thing I would say there with alcohol.
That's going to be the opening for next week's.
I was going to say, be like, yeah, this is the opening. And then we'll get into the fun stuff. I mean, I am definitely, I've never been on Team Liddy ever. I would be that person that would go out to the club when I was back in college and I would just drink water and watch people. And it was very entertaining, but it just never, I don't know. It never was my jam. I just don't like the taste of it, but that's a separate conversation. But I got to know from you, because I asked this to everybody because it comes on you, because, everyone's like, oh, what would you tell someone if you were newly diagnosed? Like, that's very cliche. So I like saying, what is the most underrated thing that has helped you with your blood sugars that people don't normally talk about?
Underrated. Honestly, 2 things. 1, eating early.
Interesting.
So underrated, because people are like, it's fine, just eat before bed. I'm like, no, because what's going to happen if you have that fat and that high carb, you're going to go to bed and at 3 a.m. you're going to have a spike that goes to 300. And granted, there are times that happens to me and I'm like, F my life right now. I knew this was coming and I wake up at 6 a.m. and there it goes. but that one's underrated because it makes such a difference. Number 2, walk 10 minutes after you eat anything, just 10 minutes. That's the most underrated. No, they didn't tell me that at Children's. I was like, I mean, obviously we talk about that a lot, but it's so underrated because it makes such a difference.
Oh, and the thing with the meals eating earlier versus later, I will say to your point, there is a way to make sure you don't go high in the middle of the night. But, and that's obviously, that's probably the number one thing that people talk with us in our practice about is like, how do I deal with that fat? And I'm like, I got you, fam. But to your point, no, eating slightly earlier, if you know it's going to be a weird, crazy meal, like even when I go out to dinner periodically with Amelia, I'll be like, let's go at 6:15 instead of going at 8.
I eat at like 5.
Oh, right. But you know, you're like, I'm going for those senior specials. I'll bring my student ID. I was just a senior. No, I'm just kidding. But you know what I'm saying. Like, I feel like slightly earlier can have advantages if you know the food's going to be crazy, because at least you'll ideally be awake when the fat does hit.
That's my thing. It's that. And it's also, I feel like I'm kind of moving and grooving still at night a little bit. So inevitably it's not like, yes. And I think for me, the other thing is if I do eat super late and I go to bed and it is a high fat, like I know I'm not going to be awake because I'm on injections to like inject in 2 hours. So I'm like, it's not like I have that, like, I'm not going to have like I don't have an extended bolus or like a, any of those special buttons. So I'm like, I wake up and I'm like, eyes swollen, mouth's dry.
Do you ever set an alarm wake up for that?
I did one time because I just knew, I knew it was going to go bad.
Just like, I know it's not going to be good. I got to make sure I'm on point.
And so I did set an alarm, and I remember I was like, you go, Smith. I'm so proud of you. Because I was like, I believe I'm an alarm to wake up to do this.
I do that all the time. That hasn't hit me and I'm not awake. And I'm like, I'm going to pass out. I'm like, I have to set this alarm now. Because if I don't, I will wake up and it will go just haywire. And I had a time, it was last summer, it's almost exactly a year ago, where I knew when it was going to hit. I knew when the fat was going to hit. It was a massive dinner. And I think I set the alarm for 2:30 in the morning. Somehow at like 2:20, I apparently turned off the alarm by accident. And then I woke up at, 5 with that same feeling that you're describing, mouth dry, everything. And I saw that everything started rising at 2:30. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me right now.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like,
it was so brutal. Well, no, this is fun. I feel like we're just scratching the surface of different stuff. And we got hormones, we got weight loss, we got a little bit of alcohol. And then I like it. It's a little bit of that's the fun part. We can talk about all the positivity and all the vibes, but oh no, you're totally good. This will be part 1 of like 17. It'll be fantastic. Tell people if they want to, hear more from you, where can they find you?
I'm on Instagram, and I hate saying I'm on TikTok, but I am.
No shame on TikTok.
But I'm on there at type 1 Sami. So, and it's the number 1. Sorry. So TYPE number 1 SAMI on Instagram and TikTok. And I'm on Honey Hill app, which is an app on the App Store. And my group is Sweat by Sami. So I do basically nutrition, exercise tips, hormonal tips, all of that good stuff. And also I'm on Honey Hill for a little podcast with my friend Bella called Daily BS. Yeah.
I'm excited for that to come out. It's going to be a fun listen.
I think it'll be entertaining.
At the very least, it will be under. No, I'm just messing.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was so fun. And I would love to have one on alcohol and positivity.
Yes, that will happen. We will pick that time. We'll make that happen. Thank you again for coming on.
Thank you.